How is it that the newest iteration of Call of Duty, a massive franchise worth billions of dollars, currently has less players than a game that looks like this? It's even more confusing when you see that while Sledgehammer Games, the developers of Modern Warfare 3, have roughly over 500 plus employees, and Activision, their publisher, nearing about 10,000, is doing worse than Lethal Company, a game that simply has one person developing it. Although maybe I shouldn't use person, as they are a furry, so perhaps they prefer to go by dog, I don't know. This isn't to put down the developers of other games, but it is genuinely amazing to see the grip that Lethal Company currently has on the gaming scene. Appearing out of nowhere, it has already forcefully pushed itself into the fabric of gaming culture, spawning countless memes, viral videos, and training plenty of people to become voice actors.
There's a little girl chasing me.
Oh, go. It's not as if an indie developer hasn't created a game to mass appeal before, all the while rivaling many of its AAA competitors. In fact, it's happened so many times that I believe indie games actually have the advantage and are beating the AAA industry, with Lethal Company being the newest example. A lot of indie games have gone on to become huge franchises, while their sole or small team of developers get to reap all the rewards. Meanwhile, a lot of AAA games are the target of scrutiny due to shady business practices, drama behind the scene, or simply the games not being the standard of quality we expect from these large-scale titles that have millions of dollars pumped into them. Coincidentally enough, the developers of Modern Warfare 3, the newest entry into the Call of Duty franchise, have been the target of criticism for poor quality, a lack of creativity, and absolutely abhorrent business practices thanks to the evils of capitalism. We'll get into that later, but I think there's a lot of factors to why these indie titles, such as Lethal Company, have gone on to reach such huge success. It's a mixture of having genuinely good ideas and the freedom that comes with indie development, because who wants to work for people who demand you add things that only bog down the user experience and put profits over creating a genuinely good game? All of this talk about toxic workplaces is a little ironic considering the subject matter. Whether Lethal Company is going to remain the indie powerhouse it looks like it's shaping up to be is neither here nor there. What I want to find out in this video is, what is this game created by a single developer doing right that games with hundreds of developers are doing so wrong? And how does one get started making games like this? When you're a lone developer with little resources but a passion for game design, where is the best place to get your start in the industry? For Zeekers, the answer may not be what you were expecting.
Roblox, it's free!
While some of you may not be familiar with what Roblox is these days, it has become a lot different compared to the casual game it was back in 2008. These days, Roblox is a full-on industry where people are making millions of dollars from their games thanks to the in-game monetization features and other payment methods developers have access to. It has always been a game about building anything, but the evolution of going from that simple childlike concept to now where developers are creating full-on games that rival even the newest Call of Duty in quality is fucking crazy to say the least. But despite how possible it is to make far beyond a living wage on Roblox, there is a rare exception where Roblox developers switch from the platform and move on to other developer tools, taking their passion for game design to the more mainstream appeal of Steam. If I had a nickel for every time a Roblox developer switched to Unity and made a viral indie game, I'd have 2 nickels.
Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
To the best of my knowledge, there are only 2 games that have been created as a result of this. The first being Unturned. Nelson Sexton, known on Roblox as his username DeadZoneZackZack, is a Canadian developer who initially started out on Roblox with the creation of 2 games. The less popular of the 2 was Battlefield, an FPS-style game that was very reminiscent of games like Call of Duty and, if you couldn't guess, Battlefield. This may not seem like much considering the caliber of games Roblox is used to these days, but for the time, this was really groundbreaking and truly raised the bar in this era. The other, much more popular game was Dead Zone, very much a DayZ-inspired zombie survival game where you fight off hordes of the undead and the even more deadly players in PvP. This game especially would lay the groundwork for what Nelson would go on to do in the future. So, with 2 fairly successful games, why would Nelson decide to leave the platform? Nelson's account was hacked, and in no time, his popular game Dead Zone was made uncopy locked. Which, for those who don't know, essentially means anyone can access your entire game. Anyone could now go into the game's place and see every piece of code. They could steal the entire map, and in no time, people had stolen the game and made their own bastardizations of it. Understandably, this made Nelson pretty damn angry. All his hard work had just been stripped and scattered across Roblox for less talented individuals to exploit for their own benefit with zero of the work he put in. As a result, Nelson decided the next best thing for him to do was to leave Roblox development behind, as he moved his sights over to the Unity engine, taking what he learned from Dead Zone and applying it to his smash hit game, Unturned. Although I never got into the game, there's no doubt that Unturned was a smash hit with a reported 24 million downloads back in 2016, which by now has surely doubled or even tripled. Even to this day, the game retains around 50,000 players daily and hasn't dropped under 10k since the game's launch. I think it's a safe bet that Nelson made the right call when it came to moving from Roblox to Unity, a choice that's created one of the best free games on the market that hasn't really died as of yet. So, seeing the success Nelson has had makes me wonder why no other Roblox developer has tried to dabble their hands in the indie scene. It was only in 2023 that another would finally follow in his path, with the creation of Lethal Company. Zeeker is the developer behind the viral game, and much like the former, also began by developing on Roblox. Like Nelson, it's very easy to see what he took from these older games and put into Lethal Company, as he very much still had a horror focus while being a Roblox dev. He made a few games such as Lightbulb, A Lucid Dream, and Silent Dark, which I did play through, and I assure you, there was nothing scary about a Roblox game. Alright, let's go, big guy. The problem is, when I went to go play Silent Dark, I had to play a remade version as the original wasn't even functioning correctly anymore. And as it turns out, this is exactly the reason Zeeker's left the platform, among other reasons, stating that while Roblox is amazing, the main reasons I left were that I would always have to maintain my games constantly to keep them playable, and how they want to be more like the App Store rather than Steam. I can't shake the feeling that it's just a glorified Flash Games website, while the latter is a matter of opinion. The first reason is justified enough. Many games do become broken as Roblox adds and makes changes to their platform, which as a developer can understandably become frustrating when your platform of choice keeps on breaking your game. With a game you've developed on Unity or any other engine, you don't really have that issue. You just have to worry about them scamming you out of download fees. So it seemed like a smart move for Zeeker's, and apparently it was, making 3 games since the Switch, those being Dead Seeker, The Upturned, and It Steals. But none quite found the large-scale audience that all developers hope for. It is understandable, however, as these were all single-player games. It wouldn't be until 2 weeks before April 19th, 2022 that he began work on his secret project, before finally revealing it to the public on July 8th, 2022. This was still part of the horror genre, something he has specialized in, but this was going to be his first online multiplayer game, as everything that came before, even on Roblox, was usually tied down to a single-player experience. From what I can gather, the game did go through some sort of renaissance during its development, changing drastically from its core concept, but it's not clear in what way, so we can only guess what the game was initially like. But this didn't stop the game from getting released on the 23rd of October 2023, which honestly isn't a long development cycle for just one guy, being met with a grandiose around 1,000 players, which is still very good for an indie game, don't get me wrong, but it wouldn't be until a mix of word of mouth, a free demo being available to play during the Steam Next Fest, and an influx of viral TikTok clips making everyone aware of this game's existence.
I'm out here! Good night, everybody! Oh, no!
It very quickly climbed and managed to peak at around 239,000 people, and has stayed roughly in the top 10 on Steam charts ever since. And so, although Roblox was responsible for helping Zeeker's learn base game design and gave him the skills necessary to create Lethal Company, it was this switch from Roblox to Unity and Steam that has given him more success than he ever had. From what I can gather from these two examples, it seems Roblox is still a good platform for developers, but making the types of games these two were making, especially in Zeeker's case. It makes way more sense to take these ideas to Steam where you don't have to worry about the problems that are associated with Roblox development, and in turn you can find great success and perhaps more importantly, mainstream appeal. So much mainstream appeal in fact that, as previously stated, it's currently beaten the newest in the Call of Duty franchise, Modern Warfare 3, being the third and presumably final in their new trilogy, which does happen to be named exactly as their previous trilogy that came out around 10 years ago. It has always been a titan of AAA gaming, but comparing the info we can find on Steam charts, Call of Duty has consistently been having a lower 24-hour peak when compared to Lethal Company. But Kazoo! I hear you counter from the stands. Call of Duty has easily doubled its all-time player count when compared to Lethal Company. And I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. That's Modern Warfare 2's all-time player count. After the addition of Warzone, they decided to merge these games into one single client. So this all-time player count was back at Modern Warfare 2's release, while around the time of Modern Warfare 3's release, it actually only achieved around 190 to 158,000 players, which is still high obviously, and it doesn't count the game's console players. But it's a bit poor for such a huge franchise and just adds to the sheer power of Lethal Company. And this isn't exclusive to COD. That's a very easy target for me, and apparently for Christopher Judge too. It's also beaten a brand new original multiplayer game that's just launched and has had a considerable amount of hype surrounding it, The Finals. The Finals is a free-to-play, team-based FPS game where the twist is you can destroy the environment. Think Call of Duty meets Teardown, and since it's also a game show, why not throw Squid Game into the mix? So, considering this is yet another hyped-up FPS game with a large development team of around 280 employees that is free to play, with all that going for it, Lethal Company has still beaten it, averaging higher 24-hour peaks and just barely being beaten by its all-time player count. I'm not a huge fan of comparing these stats like I'm trying to flex for Zeeker's, but I just want to get the point across to how well his game is doing. Why is this one indie game made by a single developer beating these extremely hyped up or legacy AAA titles? And I think I've got it down to 3 reasons. One of the simplest being that most AAA games, and if not mainstream gaming as a whole, suffers greatly from a lack of fresh ideas. Now, this is a bit of a large generalization, as we have had a lot of fresh things come out thanks to the AAA industry. For example, in terms of single-player games, AAA gaming has been relatively good. We've had masterpieces such as Red Dead Redemption 2, Elden Ring, God of War, and many more that have proven the value of big budgets mixed with a large development team. When you have the resources for these larger-than-life titles, it can and does mostly pay off, making an incredible experience for the player. After all, if this format was truly useless, then these games would just not get made. That's not to say there aren't your fair share of bad AAA single-player games, because, oh, believe me, I'm spoiled for choice. And non-surprisingly, even indie games often do have better, more fulfilling single-player experiences than AAA titles. Shining examples being Celeste, FNAF, and one of my all-time favorite games, Sans Undertale. A lot of these indie games are typically being made with worse graphics and sometimes even worse gameplay, but they're always filled with a lot more heart, with their entire game brimming with passion and, above all else, fresh ideas. Because although these AAA games are technically good, they all start to blend into one at a certain point. There's only a certain amount of open world games with crafting systems that I can take before they all start feeling like the same game. There are clear outliers to these formulas, but what's even worse for a lack of fresh ideas are the AAA multiplayer games. Again, it's a very easy target, which almost makes me feel bad focusing on it throughout this video. But there is no better example of this than the Call of Duty franchise, and even more specifically, this newest iteration. Modern Warfare 3 doesn't just have the same problem of being very similar to past and future COD games. The most egregious thing here is how similar all 3 games in this new trilogy really are, those being Modern Warfare 1, 2, and 3. If I put gameplay footage of these 3 games side by side, it would be extremely hard to genuinely tell which game is which. Like seriously, just try to guess which one is MW1, 2, and 3. Okay, made your choice? Congratulations if you actually got that right, you are a nerd. You have to be a die-hard player who knows the very subtle differences these games offer in movement, user interface, or generally just the map or weapon options to know the true differences between these games. There has been very little change between these iterations, and it really does beg the question, what is new, and why should I play COD again? For most players of the franchise, they admittedly don't care about this. It's the same reason FIFA sells millions of copies of practically the same game each year. They know they're similar experiences, but they do enjoy it. After all, it is an easy way to kill a few hours, and it isn't too mentally taxing like other shooters that will have you demolishing your keyboard in pure frustration. I mean, hell, the only reason I've touched this new COD is because my friends have begged me to come on Warzone, which isn't as bad because admittedly it's one of the better battle royales out at the moment and doesn't cost me anything to play. But even still, Warzone itself has barely changed over the years too. When you compare it to battle royales like Fortnite, adding in completely new maps every chapter and making drastic changes each season, it's really no contest which one I'd rather play. Also, Warzone does not have Peter Griffin singing Buddy Holly by Weezer, so it automatically loses by default.
Oh, yeah, I love playing Fortnite. Oh, I'm dropping into the zone. I don't care about the chug anyways. I don't care about that.
These changes keep the game fresh, while Warzone and COD itself stays stagnant and lackluster. Lethal Company, on the other hand, is a game that's as fresh as they come, which is a huge contributor to its success. In the game, you play as a squad of 4 or way more thanks to the power of modding. The objective of the game is to enter a deadly facility full of dangerous entities with only 2 objectives for you to complete. Your first being to collect scrap that's littered throughout the facility, bringing it back to your ship so that you may take it back to the company HQ where you try your best not to be bored.
Did we sell it all?
And sell said scrap to reach your quota successfully. Failing to meet said quota means you will be fired. And by that I mean fired out into the vacuum of space. Your second objective: survive. These 2 very simple objectives create a gameplay loop that I feel is unique and fresh enough to the point that I haven't really seen it done in this way before. Although there are a few games that have similar concepts. In fact, there are 2 games specifically that focus on only one of these objectives each, instead of the combination of the 2. That ends up with these games not being as strong as Lethal Company. Focusing on the collecting objective, we have Phasmophobia. The game has you face off against terrifying paranormal entities with very little you can do to ward them off. The key difference being, instead of hunting for scrap, you take on the role of a member of the Mystery Incorporated, and instead hunt for clues. Essentially, the core objective boils down to proving this ghost exists so you don't seem schizophrenic. However, this objective of collecting does not match the same adrenaline-pumping feeling of collecting scrap in Lethal Company's deadly facilities. And although you really don't want to die to the ghost, the absence of the inherent objective of survival, like in Lethal Company, does not give the same sense of urgency to your tasks. It's not a completely fair comparison, however, as these 2 games do vary wildly in pacing and intensity. But there's a reason I put the hours into this game over this one. It just works better in my opinion. The other game that focuses on our second objective of survival, we have a game I actually played quite frequently: SCP Secret Laboratory. In this game, you either spawn as a D-class, prisoners hell-bent on escaping this deadly facility; the NTF, who must stop the D-class from escaping their prison; the Chaos Insurgents, who are rebellious freedom fighters that storm the facility in hopes of aiding the D-class escape. And then you have the SCPs themselves, who just want to kill everything. The game is all about this objective of survival. There are a lot of win conditions, but the general consensus is that whatever one of these teams is the one to survive ends up winning. The thing that bogs this down a bit is the absence of any sort of second objective. When the game has no real goal besides one's own survival, it makes a lot of players act a bit more selfishly. There's no real inherent reason to be a massive team player, and the thing that bogs this down even more is the game's heavy PvP focus. It's what makes it and what sometimes breaks it. The best parts of Lethal Company are just goofing around with your team. So when you add PvP into the mix, things become a hell of a lot more sweaty and in turn toxic. So in my mind, the reason Lethal Company has far succeeded these two games in success is because of the establishment of these two objectives, working in tandem to create one of the freshest multiplayer experiences in recent years. A statement I think people agree with because this won the Better with Friends accolade at the recent Steam Awards, which was fully voted for by the players, which isn't always a great thing considering Red Dead 2 won an award for devs that keep on supporting their creation. This lack of fresh ideas is why Modern Warfare 3 is being beaten out by an indie game. Even the Finals, a hyped up game that admittedly has some fresh ideas, with hyper-destructible environments where the classes play a big part in that, whether it be the heavy class demolishing any building in his path, the light class using grapple hooks to exploit the destroyed openings in this infrastructure, and then the medium class. That heals people, I guess. I don't know, this is a pretty boring one. But when the rest of the game is your very standard, cookie-cutter, class-based team shooter, one unique concept that, if we're honestly speaking, isn't even that fresh, when it's been done to lesser extents before, is really not enough to save your game. And even more importantly, it's not enough to make your game go viral either. Back in the early days of the video game industry, it really wasn't uncommon for game companies to put their brains together to create the most compelling marketing campaigns. These ads had to make you feel like you needed this game, some ranging from genius to bad to just plain weird. And as gaming evolved, the stakes only got higher, with millions of dollars being pumped into these ad campaigns that came along with the most cutting-edge advertisement, the biggest E3 booths, with some of the most successful marketing campaigns ever made, and the Wii U's. Now coming back to the modern era, these types of high-scale advertisements with big budgets are honestly slowly becoming really pointless. Sure, they still work, and it isn't a complete waste of money, but instead of funding these big campaigns that take up your budget that could be better spent on other things, why not just let the game advertise for you? Social media has completely changed the game and what makes a game go viral and become the popular titans they are. One of the most notable examples I can think of is with Markiplier, almost being synonymous with one of the reasons FNAF became as big as it is. Even before I knew what a FNAF was, you know damn well I saw this thumbnail in my recommended every single day. Now, I'm not saying he's solely responsible. As a matter of fact, every big YouTuber who made FNAF videos is partially responsible, among Scott Cawthon's own merits for making Five Nights at Freddy's the franchise it is today. Social media has been a huge reason games have been blowing up for a while now, but I really don't think it's ever been as prevalent until TikTok has come around, with everyone becoming ADHD-riddled monsters hyperfixated on scrolling through their phones. Everyone practically is up to date on the newest trends, the most current memes, and often at times, the majority of people's TikTok For You pages are synonymous with each other's. So if you create a game that is very funny, easy enough to comprehend, and can naturally give you a lot of good clips,
I might miss, so...
oh god, then it only makes sense that your game will catch on until it explodes and goes viral. And this is the exact reason why Lethal Company is so popular right now. Before I really knew of the game, I heard it once or twice in mere passing, and then before long, thanks to TikTok here in every conversation I have, I began to get these clips all over my For You page. Starting with a few, I did find the majority of them funny, and my interest was beginning to peak, but not enough to entice me to play the game just yet. Now, if I had stopped getting these clips because it was too hard for people to capture these funny moments, then I probably would have never found the motivation to touch the game. But they would just not stop. Clip after clip after clip. And they were all hilarious. It was essentially a long hypnosis that eventually made me desperate to buy the game and hop on with a few friends, to which I had tons of fun. This doesn't happen often with other games. Sure, it does for like a week or two when a game first launches, but Lethal Company, while admittedly I've seen less of it as of late, was essentially non-stop for like a month. So yeah, the game went viral because of this, leading to these ridiculously high player counts that are beating AAA games. But how did Lethal Company go this viral compared to other games? It's actually very easy to understand why, and I've once again narrowed it down to two key elements that practically most, if not all of these viral clips contain. These two elements can be called the cause and the reaction. The cause? Well, this one isn't too hard to figure out. Lethal Company is full of terrifying entities that, combined with a great atmosphere, do a damn good job of scaring the shit out of you. Partially because unless you have that dog in you and a shovel in your hand, you're pretty much left defenseless and are extremely easy pickings for these monsters to kill you in their own gruesome fashion. In fact, some of them can't be killed, so good luck with that. There's monsters who will chase you, monsters you have to look at to stop them from unaliving you, monsters that are blind and can only hear you, so you have to quietly sneak past them so they don't do that. With there being so many possible combinations of monsters randomly generated each time you land on a moon, with each of them having their own intricate mechanics and weaknesses you must always exploit in order to survive this hellhole, the looming fear of what could be down any hallway is always present at the back of your mind. Even if you're joking around with friends, you're focused on getting ready to run as soon as you make contact with any kind of monster. This is all only heightened by a deep atmosphere Zeeker has managed to craft in all aspects of the world. The overworld with its howling winds and sounds that keep you on the edge of your seat, versus the quiet, dimly lit facilities where your footsteps and voices echo throughout its metallic hallways, never knowing what's lurking in the dark. It's these atmospheric details and intricate enemy designs that work to fully immerse you in the game. When you find yourself alone without any friends to goof around with, you will be shitting yourself from the anxiety. So, with this heightened immersion, when the game does catch you off guard with our cause, then follows the reaction. And this is where I make the argument that proximity voice is the greatest advancement ever made in gaming history. I know, I've just wiped out years of gaming advancement with that statement, but I am not sorry. In my eyes, every game has only ever benefited massively with the inclusion of proximity voice. Seriously, I believe you could add proximity voice to every game ever made, and you would only see the comedic benefits. Like seriously, add it to every game. League of Legends? I don't care if it would be super toxic. I want to yell at the other guy. Elden Ring. If my friend falls off a cliff, I want to hear his scream fade out of earshot. Fortnite, Apex Legends, Minecraft, Civilization 5, Garden of Banban. Add prox voice to all of these games and they would just be 10 times better. I may be getting ahead of myself. The point is, with a genius mix of genuinely terrifying moments fitted in with proximity voice, this is the exact reason why the game has gone viral. And sure, it's not the first game to do this. Matter of fact, the two I've mentioned earlier, Phasmophobia and Secret Laboratory, both have these factors to different extents. But with Lethal Company, I think it's the inherent nature of the game that really makes these viral clips hilarious. The game can literally switch in an instant from the most horrifying game you've ever played into genuine slapstick comedy. It often feels like I'm in an episode of Scooby-Doo or something. The ironic thing about all of this is that if you hop into Warzone on the newest Call of Duty, it does have proximity voice. And while the occasional clips do come from it that are admittedly pretty funny, it just does not have the same source or sheer amount of viral clips that Lethal Company boasts. People take COD very seriously, and so when it comes to creating funny moments by goofing around together, people aren't really too interested in playing along. The only really funny moments you can get are by being an absolute troll, which I will admit does have its moments. The point is, if you can make your game go viral easily on TikTok, then you're basically guaranteed success. We've seen it done with indie developers before, with Choo Choo Charles being first shared on TikTok, with many making the developers' videos go viral in excitement to play this game. We've also seen it with Billy Bust Up recently, which I'm so glad has gone semi-viral on TikTok, as this game isn't out yet, but I think it looks super promising, and I wouldn't have seen it if it wasn't for TikTok. Both of these developers shared progress on their work to easily attract an audience, but Zeeker didn't even need to do that. Because of the nature of the game, Zeeker has made it so us, the players, do all the advertising for him, and to a greater effect than anything a developer could make to try and advertise. Hell, even though it's a bit late due to my horrible upload schedule, this video in itself could count as free advertising for Zeeker. Not that I mind, because the game is incredible, and you should play it. Still, these first 2 points are the reasons why the game is actually successful, but there is one more reason indie games like this are destroying AAA games. And even though the first 2 points were the main reasons the game has exploded in popularity, this third reason may just be the most important and, above all else, the most serious. The gaming industry, and more specifically the AAA industry, has a huge problem that over the past decade has only gotten worse. See, when you gather a large studio of developers together, there's a lot at stake. You have countless investors pumping millions into your game, expecting returns from the profit. When there are these stakes, and it becomes more of a business than an art form, this is where you get the problem that is the bane of all game development and college students: deadlines. Now, with good management, time allocation, and a reasonable project that isn't incredibly over the top, these deadlines for the most part can work out fine. In a perfect world, devs are fairly compensated for their time and effort while not being overworked, which leads to a relatively stress-free environment.
But this is not a perfect world.
The problem is, we're seeing an increasing trend of developers working in the AAA industry, coming out and complaining about terrible working conditions being present at a lot of big studios. It's even got so bad that it's not even really a AAA problem anymore. This is what we call crunch. When a game's deadline starts to close on in, and it really seems like the development team isn't going to be able to meet the project's release date at their current work schedule, instead of the studio thinking, okay, that's fine, we'll just delay the release date, they go for more of the route of stay overtime and never see your family again. Developers will then be put into work schedules that make some Japanese business companies jealous, forcing them to work long hours, going into overtime, and honestly, it probably ends up with devs pulling the occasional all-nighter. It's become even more common, and recently with the release of Modern Warfare 3, we've seen this trend of crunch reach a new and quite frankly unacceptable low. Typically for AAA titles, for the quality we expect from them, the development time ranges from about 2 to 5 years, and sometimes it goes far beyond that. At least we got the trailer. Even with these studios having huge development teams, you need this dev time to fully flesh out your ideas, to develop and scrap concepts to see what works and doesn't, before the best version of your game is created. Among this, it provides your studio a healthy developmental cycle that has fair working hours and a good work environment for your developers. But according to anonymous developers of this recent iteration of Call of Duty, the game only took 16 months to develop. That's right, just 1 year and 4 months, which is what the fuck? For a game of this scale, this budget, and this, well, maybe not quality, it's quite frankly not acceptable for a studio this big. It's been claimed they work nights and weekends just to reach the set deadline. And laughably, this comes after Sledgehammer Games already promised they wouldn't be put through this again, after they faced similar situations when working on Call of Duty Vanguard. Now, not to totally be one-sided against Sledgehammer Games, their studio head Aaron Halen did release a statement claiming that we have worked hard to deliver on this vision, which has been years in the making. Anything said to the contrary is simply not true, essentially doubling down and saying that ideas for this game were in place long before they wrapped up their previous game, which I don't find hard to believe considering they made the exact same game twice before. There's no way for me to realistically say if he's lying before it becomes a game of he said, she said, but from where I'm standing, a head of a studio trying to save his own skin from scrutiny, and their developers going anonymous because they're afraid to speak out or to break any NDAs that may be in place in fear of being fired, is a lot more realistic to me than developers lying or this being a baseless claim. I mean, how can you believe this claim is false when stories of crunch in AAA studios is becoming an increasing issue? Epic Games employees, for example, have complained about crunch countless times, ever since they released Fortnite's Battle Royale mode. And while they were getting compensated for their overtime work, it's still brought into question many health concerns that overworking can bring. And also the inability to take time off without it being seen negatively on their performance, creating what sounds like to me as a very hostile work environment. A more infamous example comes from CD Projekt Red, which had the developers of Cyberpunk 2077 locked into months of crunch despite once again the studio making past promises. There seems to be a familiar trend here, and following the game's release, the results of overworking your employees and stripping them of any motivation is clear to see. Sure, the game recovered now, and hopefully the studio is treating treating their employees much better than before, but it still doesn't excuse it. You even have highly respected studios such as Rockstar and Naughty Dog having the same complaints of crunch. It just seems as if it's becoming more and more normalized into AAA culture. But to its credit, it's not even just AAA games anymore. Another notorious example is that of No Man's Sky, which was created by Hello Games, an indie studio as described in their YouTube bio. I mean, when you only have 15 full-time staffers during the game's development, that is pretty much an indie game. No Man's Sky is right alongside Cyberpunk to show a perfect example of what harsh crunch times and rush into release dates will do to a game's quality. But much like Cyberpunk as well, the game is now in a good state too, so hopefully work conditions have also improved. So scale it back. No big team, no heads of studio, no investors. Just simplify your project to just one guy. One single developer who is in control of everything. This means he codes the game, he creates the concepts for the game, and most importantly, he decides himself when he would like to release said game. To put it simply, this is a far more healthy developmental cycle than working in the AAA industry. Hell, you could decide to crunch and pull all night as if you want, but that's your call. You don't feel pressured, and thus, you work on the game at a pace you're comfortable with, and finish it in due time. In the end, creating a far better experience and, more importantly, a good product. No! This, as a whole, is the advantage indie games have over AAA titles. Flexibility. When you have these smaller teams, you can fund a project yourself or even get it kickstarted through crowdfunding. And this in turn means no one is in charge of the developmental cycle besides the team itself. It's why we have so many great indie games these days. And now Lethal Company is among their ranks. In all likelihood, if this was developed by a AAA studio, then the game would be bogged down with a lot of things consumers are tired of. Not to say this would be the developer's fault. I'm more putting the blame on the upper management of these big studios. Investors and overseers think they know what gamers want, but Zeeker knew what he wanted. Even if he did change his vision partway through development, it was a necessary change that, all the more likely, made his true vision become a reality. And because of this freedom for Zeeker to create his game the way he wanted and at his own pace, we now have the game that we love today. So in part to these 3 points, I generally do believe that these days, with all the advancements in terms of game creation tools at our disposal, online tutorials to teach you the basics, and just the culture of game design and creating in the current online landscape, there has never been a better time to be an indie developer, as arguably you have the advantage over the top dogs in the industry. A lot of great developers have proven time and time again that you don't need these big budgets to create amazing games that go on to outdo their big budget competitors, whether that be commercially or academically or with the most cringe fan bases. I mean, it's true. With indie games, you can even make whole franchises now that go on to take over an entire generation, for better or for worse. It is so easy these days to get a start in game development than it has ever been before, which Nelson and Zeeker have proven by starting out on something like Roblox, giving credibility to how easy these skills can be to pick up if you're dedicated enough. I think the biggest problem when it comes to the AAA gaming scene is that these studios need to take a step back, and in short, focus on quality over quantity. This isn't to say all AAA studios are like this. Some do already have this focus, and great games are released because of this. But in the case of something like Call of Duty, this is far from the case. All of this reminds me of the film industry to a lesser extent. Big studio films keep pumping out a new installment of their flagship franchise every year or two, or in the case of Marvel, multiple times a year, and are now starting to see less returns on these big releases. Meanwhile, smaller budget films made by indie directors that are full of passion and absolute love for the craft are seemingly on the rise. I hope, if anything, the story of Zeeker's immense success against these titans of gaming isn't meant to put down the developers of these AAA games, but rather to uplift and inspire future game developers to create the dream game. Go out there and learn how to code in that language you've always wanted to learn, or use that game engine like Unity to create something. The power is in your hands more than ever, so if you have an idea that's genuinely good, then what is stopping you from making it? Clearly you don't need these big budgets to have a successful career. Make your dream game with the tools at your disposal. And after all, if you don't make it, then who will?